regarding to Southern Africa. Now we have our last speaker, but not least, Ms. Martha Shumba.
Hello, everyone. Hello, can you hear me? Yeah, yes. I thought I should put the video on so that you can put the face to the voice. First and foremost, all protocol observed, I want to thank everybody who is here. I must say, I listen to each and every speaker, and I am very, very touched and appreciate the efforts from all angles to try and create the Africa we want, and by first and foremost silencing the guns. My name is Martha Shumba, as the moderator said, and I'm on Youth on Peace and Economic Development. I run an organization that focuses. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yes. Sorry, Ms. Shumba. We're gonna give you 15 minutes.
How are you seeing these other days?
Oh, okay. I had heard some noises behind, so I thought it's coming from me. All right. What I wanted to say is I run an organization called the She Dead Foundation that is focusing more on the boy child and men in Africa. And the reason why I'm mentioning this is when we are silencing the guns, and especially speaking about illicit small guns and illegal firearms, you hardly find women carrying an illegal firearm. It is mostly the boys and men. And when we also tackle the issue of gender-based violence, it is also the men mostly are the perpetrators, and women are on the receiving end. So what I concluded was I can focus mostly on the source. So when we are busy silencing the guns, I would also like to suggest that we also put more focus on the men. As much as we want to protect our women, we need to also empower the men so that they can understand why we shouldn't have this kind of situations. And also looking at that on some perspective, I got some statistics here that shows that 76% of suicide are men, and 70% homicide victims are men, 40% of domestic abuse victims are men as well. The men are the majority victims of violent crimes, usually men on men violent crimes. So why I'm highlighting all of this is as we move forward, let's not also forget to look into the reasons why we find ourselves in such situations where these young men are carrying guns all over. I want to look back at what Nkosazana Ndlovu, and I think I'm right, where she said about the issues in South Africa and so forth. There is a lot of violent crimes. A lot of young people carry illegal firearms. They use them to commit crimes. When they get angry with their spouses, they go home, they shoot the women, they shoot the children. So when we look at all of this, it is important that we also look at the root causes of all of that. We have an angry youth. They are very, very, very angry, whether at the economic or social perspective, and also the politics, not being involved or included in decision making. We rally around as adults and speak about what the problems and challenges faced by young people, without including the young people to ask them what do they think is the way forward. We've been preached many times about how they fought for our countries, how they fought for our continent, but without understanding our current situations, the guns that we need to silence, including poverty, including unemployment. we look at situations like the influx of immigrants that Nkosazana mentioned that also lead to crimes, black on black violence and xenophobia. As unjustifiable as it is, we should also need to engage the governments where all of these people, I might say, come from, to say there is need to be included when we are tackling such issues facing, especially in South Africa. I'm mentioning South Africa because it is kind of the capital city of Southern Africa when we talk about, the number of Africans who come to South Africa and so forth. So we need to also look at such issues to include those governments from political to economic issues facing in those home countries. And she also mentioned the issues of, there's no border securities and so forth. I don't think that's the issue. When you look at young people or any person who are coming from countries like Zim, they don't come here carrying guns. I can tell you that taxi owners in South Africa, they own a high number of unlicensed firearms. Sorry to mention taxi owners, but I'm just saying the taxi industry, that is where most of the shootings happens and so forth. So people go there and buy firearms. They criminal activities in their minds and so forth. But then when they come here, they find out it is well, you can get away with carrying a firearm and so forth. Can you still hear me? It's showing that my network. Okay, thank you so much. So when tackling those issues, we need to also look at the root cause in Southern Africa, identify those countries in Southern Africa that is more, where there are a lot of violent crimes. Because if we don't do that, we might end up having a situation where we blame each other. The problem is coming from here, the problem is coming from here. But no, at the end of the day, we don't have any solution at hand. So unity on this issue should come from governments, civil society, an ordinary person in any country. We should also come together. The other point that I want to highlight, especially looking at Mozambique, we have the rebels and going all around, doing all of those things that are happening behind that. Wherever there is such issues, we find out in Africa, there is an issue of minerals, there is an issue of land, there's an issue of some oil that was found here, some diamond that was found here. And our governments and all leaders are failing or not wanting to address such issues. To say rebels don't just wake up and say, who is gonna give us arms? Who is giving them the power and the firearms? Who is supporting them? Who is financing them? So if we are silencing the guns in Africa, we also need to silence those perpetrators who are behind all of these things that are happening in Mozambique. We have all watched Libya going down the drain. It is an issue that we don't want to talk about. But is Africa united enough to silence the perpetrators behind the rebels? Or is it a calculative move? Do we have other leaders who are actually partnering in this kind of situations? If we have such kind of issues, we need to also put them on the table, because hiding behind the fingers and at the end of the day waking up to say, let's deal with this situation. But when we know most of the external, most of the stuff that are happening here, especially where rebels are concerned, are not our own doing. And we shouldn't undermine the statement that says Africans are peaceful. And another issue where also youth are concerned is the vulnerability of young people. Our economy is not stable. I'll give you an example of Zimbabwe. There's a lot of influx and in South Africa because of the economic challenges facing in Zim. As Africa, or let me just say SADC, let's start it at home. If we come together to unite to assist Zim, what does Zimbabwe needs for its economic development? Forget politics. The economic development. Have we created markets in SADC to make sure that whoever have a piece of land in Zim wants to grow tomatoes is allowed to go and sell it in South Africa, is allowed to sell it in Mozambique? Have we managed to do that? Because if we don't create markets, if we don't create solutions, especially economic solutions, we'll find ourselves with young people who are vulnerable. And when a man in briefcase comes and say, I have enough guns to turn against your government, they will wake up and they will do it. And at the end of the day, we say to ourselves, young people today, you know, they are not serious, young people today, but we created platforms, we created the situations that makes them vulnerable. We have given them fake and temporary promises under a system that have made us hopeless and desperate. We found ourselves in other countries when we can actually build our own countries and spread it to the whole continent. We found ourselves, our own people in other countries, you know, being involved in criminal activities to make ends meet. We found our girls, you know, being the flowers of taverns and shabins, standing in the street corners, selling themselves. Have we come together to say, one of us is crying? I want you to act as if the house is on fire, because the house is actually on fire. You know, we showed that we are united back then and we are unstoppable. Can we just have the spirit of the Mandela, the spirit of the Mugabes, the spirit of all the revolutionaries be planted in our young people, not to turn against our continent, but to create projects, to create the enterprise culture, entrepreneurship programs, the right quality education to enhance our own economic development. Let us empower the next generation of leaders, which is young people. But by empowerment, we are talking about mainly economic empowerment to champion sustainable development, create platform for young people to engage in mental decolonization programs. Because if we don't do that, we always think that there is a higher power and a master that is better than me. So when that master comes with a briefcase, I'm more than willing to go. Lay out projects for permanent freedom. We have older people who say, I used to work at Bata, I used to work at ISCOM. That man is 76 years old. He has nothing, no legacy to show for it. Leaving young people, leaving children and grandchildren who are very angry. You know, I was looking at Sister John Roth's biography, who died at only 48 years old. As much as we don't like it, look at what he achieved. And a 40-year-old today, they are still saying we need jobs. That's the reality in Africa. We need to own our land, we need to own our minerals, we need to own everything. As long as we don't have that in our hands, it's not able for us to control the peace and security that we're talking about. Somebody else will come and detect and determine our way forward simply because they have the briefcase full of money, because they come and say we can build this in Africa. As long as we don't own that in our own hands, we'll always have the guns behind our backs. And guess who suffers the most? Our women and children. Our youth are vulnerable. The quality education that I spoke about, let's cultivate on that. That is pro-African, that allows us to build our own companies, not work for someone else and leave no legacy. We have this burning desire as young people. I've worked with a lot of civil organizations. Last year we did the campaign, which was in Africa and all over the world in fighting the sanctions imposed on Zim. of which some we take it so much lightly, and we also engage in many programs that we are teaching young people to grow their own food. And as we are telling these young people, to surrender their firearms, to tell them that crime is wrong, we need to have a substitute. What are we substituting that for? Okay, I'm
Ms.
wrapping
Martha
up.
Shumba,